Scott Jennings, the voice of reason over at CNN. Scott Jennings, the only reason that it's worth tuning in to CNN. In fact, don't tune into CNN. Go to X and wait for clips to get posted of Scott Jennings. That's a better way to consume it. But Scott Jennings, one of the most reasonable men in America, weighed in on this very topic. Let's listen to what he had to say.
You know, whether you're an athlete or anyone else, if I hear you use the phrase, my truth, I immediately then discount everything else you say, because there isn't my truth or your truth. There's just the truth. And when you start using phrases like that, it tells me that
not true.
Your brain has been captured by something that I don't really respect.
That's not true.
Number two.
That's not true.
Number two, the attention the league got this year was amazing, and it was all because of her. She is an amazing player. The arenas were full when she played in them. The TV ratings were up when she was on television. That's undeniable. But, you know, the league still lost like $40 million this year. And it's never made money. And to me, when you're talking about having respecting people who built something, what did they build? A league that loses money every year? She has the capacity.
What do you mean? What did they
possibly
build? What do you mean? What did they build?
What kind of a business did they build?
The reason why it's still up and still running, whether it's losing money or not, is because of these black women who are in this.
Isn't it because of the investors?
No, Scott, stop it. You stop it now.
It's not. I was in Dickie's arena.
Who pays for it?
I was in Dickie's arena. Let me just tell you.
It says more about the people who are getting offended by it than her.
I think they're just disappointed that she appears to have been captured by the woke mob.
You don't like the word.
And here's the disappointment.
It's the white privilege. Let him articulate this, because I want to learn something.
I feel a little bad for her, because she's going to learn that it will never be enough. No matter how much of the phrasing, no matter how much of the groveling you do, it will never be enough for the people in that league that hate her guts.
Why do you assume
they hate her guts?
Why do you assume that she is trying to pander? Isn't it
because I hear the language. It's the language of the pandering.
Scott Jennings saying she's the best thing to happen to the WNBA, and it's too bad her coworkers hate her for it. If there's one thing that we have learned from the sort of identity politics, identity culture that the left has embraced so tightly in recent years, it's that you can never please them. And when you attempt to bend, when you attempt to throw them a bouquet, when you attempt to try to validate some of their complaints, and in an effort to extend an olive branch and hope that somehow you can both latch on to something where there's at least an acre of common ground somewhere, it never pleases them. It never pleases them. They move on to the next set of grievances. Caitlin Clark will never be able to say enough pandering things to the folks who see everything through the prism of identity to make them happy, and in doing so, she's going to upset people who see it for what it is. And she's going to lose fans, and it's unfortunate because, again, as I've said, Caitlin Clark is a basketball player. She's a young person in her early 20s who should be focusing on basketball, and I'm sure she is. I'm sure she's working on her game, getting ready for her second season, and I'm sure she's going to be even better in her second season. But still, you are diverting energy, attention, emotion from where it should be. She does not have to be some sort of cultural, racial spokesperson, and being put in a position where she feels compelled to do that is fundamentally unfair to her. The WNBA has not succeeded for 30 years because of anything to do with the race of its players. Most of the great players have been black, and all credit to the outstanding female basketball players who have played in that league for 3 decades. But the fact is, how good you were didn't move the needle. It didn't translate to dollars. It didn't translate to butts in seats. It didn't translate to people tuning it in on television. And Caitlin Clark changed all of that. And to say that the main reason that happened is her race is a fucking insult to her, and it's a fucking insult to people like me who tuned in specifically to see her talent, not the color of her skin. And with that being said, I will go now to the international streaming star who joins me from Nashville, Tennessee, Ronnie T-Shirts. Ronnie, Caitlin is back in the headlines here for us. I knew she was going to be in 2025. I wasn't necessarily expecting it to happen before the end of the year, but here we are.
Yeah, did you touched on it with some names, and I'm so confused. Like, why do people think that the reason that there's even a smidge of interest from somebody like me and you for the WNBA is because Caitlin Clark is white? You named 4 players. Let me give you Elena Deladon, Brianna Stewart, Cameron Brink, Kelsey Plum. They're all white too. Why are they not moving the needle? Like, some of these girls are really good, like really good. Like Sabrina. I mean, Sabrina was in the 3-point contest against Steph, right? In this last All-Star game. So it's just another bullshit. We have a narrative and we've got to move this narrative. And so we're just going to say, it's because she's white. It's not because she's white. It's because she's good. Dude, do you remember the first time you saw Michael Vick play quarterback for Virginia Tech? Holy crap, dude. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before at quarterback. I was mesmerized. I couldn't stop watching it. About four years ago, I had basically sworn off college basketball. And then this kid started playing for Duke, Zion Williamson. I'd never seen a dude that big move that way before. I watched almost every Duke basketball game. Like, I'm not looking at the color of their skin. I'm looking at, oh my God, I've never seen that before. And that's all we're seeing from Caitlin Clark. So why this she's white bullshit? It makes no sense to me when there's a whole, you talk about a disservice. It's a disservice to the 8 players that we named. Like, they're really good. And so why didn't they get behind? Why didn't America get behind them?
They weren't good enough. They were good for women's basketball. And again, I know I sound like an asshole to some people right now, but I'm just saying the truth. Right, Ron?
No, my point is, if it was because
it was on a whole other level.
It's because if we were watching because they were white, then we would have watched because of them, because they were good basketball players and they're white. So then based off of their logic, I should have been watching back in, I don't know, 2014 when Elena Deladon was playing. That's not why. It's because Caitlin Clark
is. And why is it limited to women's basketball? I don't think anybody would suggest that this is happening with men's basketball. The NBA, which is actually profitable, which is actually a sustainable business model without charity being subsidized by someone else, that league is predominantly black, has been for years and years and years, and people consume it. And I'm not a huge fan of the modern style of game, but I could sit here and rattle off dozens and dozens of black male basketball players that have entertained me and that I respect and that I love to watch the highlights. I mean, we could just start going through the Dream Team. We could start going through the 1980s and reciting the Western Conference and Eastern Conference teams. And it's going to be full of outstanding black players that fans have obviously willingly accepted and loved. So why is the racism only going to kick in because someone is female? It just doesn't pass the logic test, Ron.
No. Ricky, racism... Racism wasn't what they're saying. I don't even know how to say this. I'm so flustered right now. In the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, it didn't seem like there was a big problem with racism. I mean, for God's sake, Gatorade said that we should all be like Mike, right? They did a whole huge marketing campaign. I want to be like Mike. And now it's like this, like all of a sudden, in the last, I don't know, tell me, was it 10 years? It's like everything has to be racist.
It's the woke mind virus. And it gained a lot of steam after Charlottesville with the Very Fine People hoax. They put Donald Trump out there saying something that if that was all he said, and if he had meant what they have portrayed him to say and made that the totality of his statement, it would be an absolutely awful thing. But it's not what he said. And so, but we have seen this demand for a certain amount of demand for racism. And I would argue to you that demand from the left has exceeded the supply. Look, I totally 1000% condemn all racism. When I was a little boy growing up in Kentucky, my mama told me, you judge people on who they are as a person and their character. She listened to Dr. King, a little white woman, little God-fearing Southern Baptist white woman from Kentucky, and I'm grateful. My hero from the time that I was 6 years old, I lost my dad when I was 5, as you know, Ron.
Yep.
And my hero, I looked up harder to male role models probably than the average person. And you know who my 2 big male role models were when I was a little kid? Reggie Jackson and Muhammad Ali. Okay? Those were my 2 biggest heroes when I was a kid. I had pictures of them up, all plastered all over my bedroom wall. I admired them, looked up to them. As you know, my story of meeting Muhammad Ali, one of the most impactful days of my life, apart from the birth of my children. Okay? So, you know, but we are at a point here. So racism, yes, I condemn it completely. I have my entire life. I taught sociology
almost everybody does
for 21 years. I got thousands of students who can sit here and say what Ricky Cobb said in the classroom about how despicable racism is and how much it's damaged our country. George Wallace standing in front of an academic building in Alabama to deny the first black student from being able to enter to go to a college class. Reprehensible. What happened in Oxford, Mississippi when James Meredith was the first black student at Mississippi? Reprehensible. The fact that no black players were allowed to play in Major League Baseball until 1947 is a stain on our society. It's shameful. And all of these things are real. They happened. They should be condemned. And we never want to have a society that allows those kinds of things to happen again. But what we have seen in recent times with the leftist movement, the woke movement, whatever you want to call it, is, I think, using racism at times as a device to try to get the narrative going in the direction that they want it to go. And in the case of Caitlin Clark, I think that this is misplaced.
Then all I can think about right now is the left just must be really, 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 really stupid, because that was their playbook for, what are we going on, 6 years, maybe 4 years? They just saw that it backfired immensely on them, and yet they keep doing it. So I don't understand why they keep going to the same playbook that just doesn't seem to resonate with the American public.